Whether you're on the right or on the left or feel politically homeless, I think it's fair to say that most of the country feels emotionally exhausted from low quality, angry, excessively emotional political discussion. And this is a video to teach you the way that I approach political discussions with a focus on efficacy rather than trying to dunk on one another or argue people into submission through using your voice at the maximum volume that you possibly can. Oh my God, aren't we all tired of this? So last Monday, I was on Piers Morgan Uncensored. And for those of you who are not familiar with the show, sometimes it starts to resemble Jerry Springer for politics.
Liberals.
And
you're all cheering. You're all cheering this nonsense.
People are just yelling over one another. They're talking past each other. And often they're not really engaging with each other's points. However, the way that I showed up was different than what people are typically used to seeing. And if you look at the comments, people really resonated. Particularly, people resonated with how calm I was, how clear I was, and how compassionate I was in communication. And not that it's a competition, but if it were, and you let the commenters vote, I would have won. Now, although I made rationally intelligent arguments, I think the reason that I actually resonated with so many people was because I brought emotional intelligence to a political discussion, which is something that is all too rare. So in this video, I'm going to show you two clips. And each clip is different. One is more of a monologue where I'm making my point in response to everyone else's point. And another one is more of a management of the discussion by acknowledging other people's points while also having to hold boundaries when people try to interrupt me or do other things that get in the way of having a quality discussion. First, here's the monologue. Now, as you watch this, I want you to pay attention less to the specific points that I'm making and more pay attention to the fact that in my monologue, I'm responding to points that are made by every single other participant. And the reason why is because this is the first tip. When I'm in a discussion with people, I'm more focused on listening than speaking. Look, when you enter a debate, you already know what your beliefs are. You already know what you want to say. But people can tell when you're going into a discussion focused on just speaking and not listening. And when you're just speaking and you're not listening, you can't actually respond thoughtfully to what the other person is saying. And that creates two problems. One, you look kind of silly because you look like you're just talking past the other person and you're likely to actually miss errors in their argument that you could correct, as well as miss opportunities to in fact agree with them, but show why even though you agree with them on minor points, they're missing the major points. And when you do that, you might get people who are listening to the debate who already agree with you to agree because you're just confirming their existing beliefs. But especially in America, most people are not locked into some particular ideology. The majority of the country is not locked in on the left or locked in on the right. The majority of the country is in the middle. So most people are not going to be convinced by you just making your argument. Most people need to see you juxtapose your argument with the opponent's argument in order to be convinced that you're correct. So watch this clip to see exactly what I mean.
The vast majority of the Tesla protesters, and I suspect this will be the case when we see the demonstrations, if they're exercising their democratic right to peacefully protest, that's a fundamental bedrock of American society.
Absolutely, and we should protect their right to protest. But I want to respond to something that Bishop said and what Cenk said by implication. The fact that there are double standards being applied does not mean that we should not apply the standard. It just means that we need to apply the standard consistently. So again, people are saying, yes, it's terrorism. No, it's terrorism. The first question we should start with is, what is the definition of terrorism? Terrorism is a systematic use of terror to accomplish a political end. If someone is lighting a Molotov cocktail, I don't care if they're white, black, brown, or something in between, that is an act of terrorism. Now, do they represent a fringe of the anti-Elon, anti-Tesla movement? Absolutely. And we don't need to paint everyone with the same brush. But we shouldn't refer to past instances where we failed to identify terrorism as a reason to not call this terrorism because we don't like the word. So this is what I see on both the right and the left. We have people pointing the finger at inconsistencies in the other camp to justify inconsistencies in their own camp. And if we continue to do that, no one will ever make progress. I also see a lot of cherry picking about certain ideals that Elon might espouse or certain things about his character, like, for example, the fact that he's a billionaire. Kamala Harris had 83 billionaires support her in the 2024 election. Donald Trump had 52 billionaires support him in the 2024 election. So people saying billionaires, this is like a curse word that's being used conveniently while ignoring the fact that there are billionaires on both sides and more billionaires on the Democratic side traditionally. Now, to your point about LGBTQ rights and all of that, we should keep in mind that the position of the LGBTQ community has evolved over time. And I think that's totally fine. But I think early in the 2010s, no one was talking about biological males competing in sports with biological females. So there's a question here of, did Elon evolve his views? And also, did he leave the left or did the left leave him?
Yeah.
And besides all of this, I honestly think much of this is a distraction. I think the thing that we actually need to be talking about as leaders right now is, what is the pain that people are feeling? Why are they expressing it this way? How can we acknowledge that pain? And how can we put constructive solutions in place as leaders here on this show? And what can we ask the Trump administration to do to solve this wound? Because I see people who are in pain. I believe that the way that they're expressing it is not constructive, but there's a legitimate pain that needs to be acknowledged, and there's things that we can do to resolve that. So whether you like Elon or not, I think is honestly a distraction. We need to talk about the actual solutions that need to be introduced to solving the existential problems facing America, not whether Elon likes LGBT people or not.
So in this next clip, I want you to watch really carefully because I break down every few seconds exactly what I'm doing. And I'm going to provide you commentary step by step. So check this out.
Sharing good people, the liberals.
And
you're all cheering. You're all cheering this nonsense. Kaizen,
I wish the same.
Given Kaizen's put his hand up politely, he may speak first. Kaizen.
So I want to break this down, like how I approach conversations. Step one is I already knew going in there's going to be a lot of talking over each other. I didn't know how I would deal with it besides not contributing to that by not talking over each other. But in the moment I was inspired, I was like, you know what would be kind of funny, honestly, and kind of like childlike and like in a good way? What if I just raise my hand? Like, you guys remember in grade school when you're taught, when you have something to say, you raise your hand and the teacher picks on you? Well, you know, this is Piers Morgan's show. He's the host. He's the leader. He's the one whose home we're in. Let him decide who gets to talk rather than all of us just like fighting with one another. I want the host to decide who gets to talk, not whoever's the loudest and most aggressive to decide who gets to talk.
Yeah, we got to find a way to talk better, guys, because this is not good. And this is actually an example. This is a microcosm of the bigger issue with civil discourse in this country. So, Taylor, I agree with you that this is a fringe that is not representative of a whole. And I said that earlier, and I'll say it again. Both the left and the right have fringes that need to be called out and condemned, and the core needs to distance themselves from that fringe. I think what Piers is saying is that when you have people clapping on multiple late night comedy shows about Tesla's getting vandalized, it's indicative of a zeitgeist that is sympathetic to hostile acts of aggression toward people who are middle-class citizens who are having their private property be vandalized.
Yes.
Okay, so you see how I started off my comment? So what you don't see in this clip is a moment where Taylor, she keeps on insisting that the people who are vandalizing Teslas and carving swastikas and throwing Molotov cocktails, she's saying it's just a minority of an overall peaceful movement. And I agree with her. I don't think the majority of the people who are engaging in the anti-Elon, anti-Tesla protests are doing all of this stuff. I think social media amplifies the fringe, but it's definitely more people than we should see doing all this stuff. It is more widespread than I think she was maybe acknowledging, but she's right. It is a minority. So when someone says something that's credible, I want to acknowledge that because it demonstrates a few things. One, it demonstrates that I'm actually listening to them. And doesn't everyone want to be heard in a conversation? Like, think about in your own experience, guys. Isn't it frustrating when you're talking and it feels like the other person's not listening? The most frustrating thing is to be speaking and not be heard. Because why even speak if no one's listening? You might as well talk to yourself at that point. So I think it's important just from a human connection standpoint to just acknowledge the other person and what they're saying. And sometimes in conversation, even if I don't agree what they're saying, I'll just summarize what they're saying. And I'll say, hey, can I repeat back what you just said to make sure that we're on the same page and I understand your view? And then I'll say something like, Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're saying that the group of people who are vandalizing Teslas and painting swastikas and throwing Molotov cocktails at charging stations are a minority. Is that correct? Cool. And by doing that, it establishes that not only am I listening to them, I get to confirm that I actually understand what they're saying. Now, in this context, I would have loved to ask a question in that way, but there's 4 of us and I can't really ask questions back and forth. So you kind of have to, when you're in this environment, you kind of have to just like make a comment, but that is what it is. So yeah, just identify where you actually agree before you jump into where you disagree.
The class citizens who are having their private property be vandalized.
Yes.
But again, I actually want to move off of this point and focus. Taylor, please, my hand was up. Pretty, please, can I talk? Okay, so I just want to finish and then I'll hear you out. I have not interrupted you either.
Okay, I'm proud of that moment. I was not expecting for that to come out of my mouth. To be honest, when I said that, I was like, oh, I hope this doesn't come across as condescending. But I was like, I want to be playful, right? Because in politics, everyone's so like serious and uptight and like it's life or death every single conversation, and that's also exhausting. Because look, politics is here to support our life, and I think in life we all have one thing in common. We just want to have a good time. Like everyone, no matter whether you're black, brown, purple, male, female, from Uganda, China, Kazakhstan, America, everyone just wants to have a good time. Political discussions, yes, they're about serious things. We don't need to make it more serious than it absolutely needs to be though. So that's why I was like, okay, like pretty please, like come on, like let me just finish what I'm saying and then you can talk too. And I told her, hey, I'm not interrupting you. And I think that reflects back to her, oh, okay, yeah, that's another human being. This human being has treated me in a certain way. I can do them the same courtesy by speaking to them or not speaking over them while they're speaking. If you're watching closely, there's a moment where she rolls her eyes. I thought it was funny. I mean, I'm not offended. Honestly, she's probably not used to someone engaging with her that way, because I think most time people are just yelling over each other and they just do that until someone gives up. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not going to play that game. I'm also going to enforce a boundary, though. And this is important, right? Because it's peace through strength. And you want to be peaceful, but you don't want to be passive. Own your space when it's your space. When you're talking and someone tries to interrupt you, don't just let them interrupt you and run away with it. You can calmly enforce a boundary and say, hey, sorry, I'm actually not done finished. And please allow me to finish, and I'll make sure to do you the same courtesy. So you can just do that, because if we're all just talking over each other and the only way we decide who gets to move forward is who's more determined to talk, that's not getting anywhere. And doesn't everyone feel crappy when someone interrupts you and you're just like sitting there like, well, I wasn't done talking, but I guess I'm just gonna let them go. Like, doesn't it feel bad when that happens? So set the boundary, but do it calmly, right? You notice how I didn't elevate my voice. I didn't start yelling at her. I didn't make it personal. I just say, hey, pretty please, can I finish? And then I think she just had a moment of self-reflection, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be engaging in this way. So let's keep going.
If people want to say that there's an oligarchy now, I would say that there's always been an oligarchy. We're just seeing one of the billionaires transparently engaging with government, which I actually find personally refreshing, that at least I know who it is this time and I can examine from first principles, do I like what he's doing or not? So let me articulate what I see from based on what Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent and other members of Trump's team have said is their strategy. They want to raise $1 trillion to cut the deficit by tariffs, this Trump gold card, and reshoring manufacturing in the United States. They want to remove $1 trillion of spending through Doge. And that's overall their plan to get the deficit intact, to make sure that we're not entering this situation where all social services and healthcare are going to be cut for everyone.
Fifth point. Be as specific as you can during these conversations. People apply labels, and these labels mean something different to everyone, and as a result, they don't mean anything specific to anyone, right? So fascist, Nazi, Marxist, communist, racist, white supremacist, all of these terms, they're so overused. Like, think about your own experience. When you hear those comments, does that make you feel like, oh, there's a really interesting point coming? Or it's like, oh, I've heard this before. This sounds like politics again. That's how I react. Like, the moment I hear someone engage in these vague labels, and it's okay to use it a little, but people rely on them over much, I start to tune out, and I'm like, okay, this person's kind of hiding behind these general vague terms And usually I find that they're hiding because they're not clear on specifically what they think, or they can't be specific about the evidence and the facts and the data to support their statement. So here's the thing. It's like, look, I'll even take the most extreme case. Let's say you actually think that Trump is a white supremacist. Even if you think that he is, you need to provide evidence. And in fact, the more extreme the claim, the more abundant the information and evidence needs to be. So if you're going to say something extreme, you need to back it up. So for me, look, sometimes in conversations, I'm obviously here paying attention to this stuff full time, making a career out of this. I don't expect everyone to be as well versed on some of the facts as I am, but your confidence in what you're saying should be directly proportional to how much evidence you have to back it up. That doesn't mean that you can't say things that you don't have all the evidence to support, but if you know that you don't know for certain, just don't act like you do. It's okay. I don't expect everyone to have a bunch of facts ready all the time to just drop on people. But what happens is people become so performative and they refuse to just say, hey, I actually don't know. Or, hey, I've never heard that before. I'll look into that. Why don't you tell me more about it? And it's not a loss to not know something. It just means that you don't know something. We all know much less than there is to be known. So we don't need to pretend that we know everything. You see, what people do is they engage in this lazy form of argumentation where instead of talking about the problems, they talk about the people. And then they're talking about Elon Musk and him as a person and Trump and him as a person when it's like, hey, you don't know these people. I don't know these people. So why are we talking about these people that neither of us know? What we see, even in the best case, is a bunch of podcasts and interviews and clips. You don't actually know them. So rather than assuming things about the interiority of someone's mind, let's just talk about the things that they say they're going to do. Let's talk about if they actually have a track record of doing them so we can trust what they say. And let's talk about whether the things that they're trying to do are good or bad. Much simpler. That's objective, right? That's a difference between saying something objective versus subjective. Subjective commentary relies on the subject, right? So if I say subjective things, then you need to be Kaizen for you to agree with them. But if I say objective things, it's about something outside of the subject. We can both observe an object. You guys can see that this is a microphone, right? We could objectively all observe this and say this is a microphone. You don't know what's going on in my head right now. I don't know what's going on in Elon or Trump's head. I don't want to talk about that. I don't care. I care about what they do. And to the extent that their personality matters, I care about what they've done, not my subjective judgment of their psyche, which is so silly. Okay, so let's keep going here.
For everyone. So if people don't like that plan on this panel, I would like to hear the alternative plan, because for the last 25 years, we've tried the bureaucratic means. We've tried working within the system. We have not made progress, and we are in an emergency scenario right now.
Challenge the opposition to present a solution. It takes a lot less energy to destroy than it takes to create. So many people are so fixated on what they don't like about something, and that's inherently critical, and we need critics. But so much of the time, people are so fixated on what they don't like and what's wrong and what's negative, they don't actually have an alternative. And here's the thing, every solution creates new problems. Every single one. Elon and Trump are creating problems. The question is not whether they're creating problems. The question is, are the problems that they're creating bigger or smaller than the old problems? That's a question. Life is just solving problems. When you're single, you want to be in a relationship. So that's your problem. But once you're in a relationship, now you got relationship problems. Then you solve some of those problems, you get married. Now you got deeper relationship problems that you have to work through. Then you have kids. Now you have a new set of problems taking care of the kids. Then the kids stop being little toddlers who are pooping their pants. Then you have new sets of problems because they're more advanced kids. Life is just solving problems. Or you could say, if that sounds depressing, I don't mean for it to be depressing. I think problem solving is fun if you have the right attitude about it. It can be puzzles, right? Like, I like video games. I don't get to play them that much these days, but I used to work in the gaming industry. I actually used to play games professionally, if that's a fun fact. All games are problem solving, but we make the problems fun. That's why people don't feel like they're working. They feel like they're doing fun things. People like to solve problems. So when people fixate on, here's a problem, it's like, yes, we get that. What is your solution that's better? What is the solution that you're providing that creates smaller problems and bigger solutions? If people don't have that, they don't really have much of an argument at all. So challenge people is like, okay, well, what do you propose we do instead? Pretty simple. And then it puts the burden back on them to think about what they're saying, not just to point fingers at what other people are doing. Let's continue.
And we are in an emergency scenario right now.
Okay.
So Bishop Swan, I think there's genuine grievances on some of the way the Trump team has messaged around DEI.
Okay,
and I think
we've got to bring everybody in because we're wrapping up. But I saw Cenk very unusually raising his own hand.
Next lesson, just respect the host, right? So I'm not going to let another panelist talk over me, as I demonstrated earlier, but it's Piers Morgan's show. It's his platform. If he says you're done talking, I'm done talking. Maintain decorum, right? I think decorum is actually a good thing. Social decorum is important because social decorum is essentially the rules for coordination, so we don't have a mess when we try to interact with other humans. So yeah, just respect decorum, and the more you do it, the more that you have the grounding to enforce decorum on other people. Because remember earlier, Taylor interrupted me, but part of the reason that I had license to check her was because I hadn't been interrupting her. So if I'm following the rules, I get to say that you got to follow the rules too. It gives me more authority to do that.
Very unusually raising his own hand, asking for permission to speak. I like this. I like this new development. It's a whole new thing, Kaizen, entirely down to you. So, Cenk, given the unprecedented nature of your polite request to speak, I'll return the floor to you.
Okay, so you can see the cheeky little smile and the and the thumb up. I think part of the reason that people behave so badly on social media and on talk shows and in politics is because everyone's just scared. Honestly, people just feel unsafe. Like, people have difficulty dealing with conflict. People are scared of disagreement because it implies conflict. And as a result, especially when people's jobs are on the line or they know thousands of people are watching, they feel unsafe. They feel literally unsafe. And when people feel unsafe, I mean, look at a child. When a child feels unsafe, what do? They freak out. They might start crying. You're not going to see that very often in politics. But usually the way people will get is actually just puff themselves up and get angry and get bigger. It's like, look, you can't mess with me. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. This like performative outrage. And it's innocent. Like, we're all just kind of kids who grew up and now we pay taxes. Kind of just kids who have adult responsibilities. But that's what's at the core of a lot of this anger and this outrage. People are scared. They don't know how to communicate that. They're afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of being embarrassed. And they behave in weird ways because of that. So you can just lighten up, right? Like, if you feel safe in the interaction, then you have an opportunity to change the emotional tone and the dynamic of the interaction, but just bring in a little bit more of levity in play. And that's why I was like, all right, let me just raise my hand. That's like, let me like give a thumbs up. And let me say pretty please when someone interrupts me. Like, I'm not here to fight with you. In an ideal world, this is a group of leaders on a show together, spreading ideas that are moving the human race forward. That's what these conversations should actually be. Not someone trying to dunk on someone else for viral clips so that they can get more followers. It's so dumb. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, here, of course I have incentives. Of course I want to make money. Of course I like having social status. Of course I like being connected with cool people. Of course I like speaking on big platforms. I personally don't want to do it off a brand that is just spreading more of the same nonsense that we're all exhausted from. And I like to believe there's many people who have an appetite for something fresh and new instead of this stale garbage. So personally, that's what I want to make my brand out of, right? Like, I just want to model the behavior I want to see because it's emotionally really exhausting, and we all want to have a good time. We got this one life, or maybe if you're a Hindu, you think we get multiple lives, but at least you got this one incarnation. So let's enjoy this one incarnation, yeah? Let's not keep fighting with each other. And this is not just about leaders, right? Because leaders and politicians are a reflection of the people. So if we are creating a culture where we're celebrating hostility and we're doubling down when leaders need to own up, and we're name calling and we're constantly giving into emotional reactivity, well, we reap what we sow, and we will just keep on getting it, and it'll be the right in power, and then it'll be the left in power, and we'll just keep on swinging the pendulum, and nothing fundamentally will actually get accomplished. That's why I mean it when I say how we talk about things is more important than what we talk about, because the what's always changing. There's always going to be problems, but we need to get better at the act of actually problem solving. So thanks for watching that review of Piers Morgan experience. It was really interesting. I'm really personally proud of how I showed up. I'm really glad that it resonated so powerfully, and like taking the me out of it. If you look at the YouTube comments and you look how people are receiving this, I hope that you personally feel inspired, because what it should show you is that there are many of us who just want to see adult, rational, calm, clear conversation. Many of us, I think everyone at some level wants us, but many of us are like craving it and ready for it. And yeah, I'd like to see a new crop of leaders and influencers who are embodying that, because look, life can be amazing. We certainly have all the technology. I think most of the problems that we have are not technological problems. They're social and cultural problems. And we are the culture. We are society. So we can change it.